Someone messaged me the other day saying, how do you get accustomed to relying on discipline and not motivation? And I think it comes down to just sticking with your goals for longer, especially the harder parts. Motivation versus discipline. One of these is free and the other is gradually earned over time.
It's like suddenly now you're kind of off the leash. And I felt pretty lost, honestly, because when I was on the leash, I feel like I was just treading water. I wasn't actively thinking about where I was going. I was just going to wherever the person was walking me. But after you're off it and you're just like, now you kind of look at your deficiencies and now it's really coming to light, because now everything that you did the bare minimum before, you're starting to pay a little bit of the consequences now, because you don't really know what it means to work hard. You don't really know what it means to stick with problems for a little bit longer. And that was like the big reflection internally. Like, you were never historically good at anything. You never were really talented at anything. And you also refused to do any of the work that would bridge the gap between where you want to be. You have no talents and you also have no work ethic. But I feel like it's always just been me and my own thoughts, for better or for worse too. When I was like doing all this posting stuff too, I didn't follow really anyone. None of my friends, didn't connect with anyone, didn't want to, because I just wanted to focus on just pump it out and seeing no results. Like, it was bad enough that there was just like no results whatsoever. Now it's like, you don't want to think about people looking at you and being like, yo, this guy's a freak. I'm just like, if it's not going to help me, and if it's only going to hurt me, even if it's like 1% of just something wired in the back of my head, you know, I can't have that. And that's something that I'm willing to cut out, because in my heart of hearts, I know this is what I want to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. Whether they do encourage me or don't encourage me, it really doesn't change the fact that I still have to do it either way. And the reality hasn't been created yet. And it's still only up to me. I guess just the way I like to do my videos. If I don't believe what I'm saying, if I haven't really been living to any of the values that I talk about, I won't post it. That's one. But the bigger thing is I can't do the video. I can't talk about it. The words don't come to my brain. My mind shuts off. It just feels insincere.
How often do you meet failure?
I will say I will snooze. You know, I will lay in bed for an extra 10 minutes. I will drag. I'll brush my teeth extra long, man. You know, like, that's the hardest part, to make it outside the house. I think the beauty and believing in that is that you start to find value in today when you start doing the things that just suck the most. You have to honor promises to yourself. You have to promise yourself that you're going to stick with those problems for a little bit longer. Put more time in. Put more time in yourself. This is the only way you're going to change in whatever shape or form, whatever field of life. That's the promise. And if you keep keeping that promise to yourself each day, you know, you're like, that personal atonement is happening.
The Patina'd podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd podcast.
I'm very excited to have today's guest. It's Andrew Chi. And one of the reasons I was telling you, Andrew, before we push record here, that I'm very excited is because I didn't get to do a ton of research on you other than what I've seen from your Instagram. So I'm excited to kind of get to know you, get to know some of the background. You have a ton of followers on Instagram, and you're somebody that a lot of people are resonating with in terms of just doing hard things, being accountable, saying what they're going to do and following through with what they're going to do. And when I started looking up your stuff, I'm like, man, this would be great to have Andrew on. So yeah, I'm happy to have you on, dude.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. So is it okay if you share a little bit of your backstory, growing up, parents, all that sort of stuff, and just kind of let us know who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, absolutely, man. New Jersey, born and raised. Really nothing, honestly, just to preface this, like nothing extraordinary. Just like probably the most average guy out of average guys. Pretty lax upbringing, honestly. Never had like the super, strict regimented parents. They, if there was anything that probably contributed to any of the way I developed, is they really let me just find my own way. They let me explore myself. They guided me through with general values of, always try your best, be kind to people. Discipline is freedom, honestly. But aside from that, everything else, they kind of left me to my own vices. And yeah, I really can't appreciate that enough because I feel like it's given me the opportunity to actually be able to find myself, um, with all of that freedom growing up and even to this day, But yeah, I mean, I guess I was kind of a swimmer by trade initially. That's how I got into the physical space at all. Swam through pretty much all of grade school, did a little bit of club swimming in college at Rutgers University, still in New Jersey. And then, yeah, like throughout that time too, eventually I found my way into just a gym, working out in general. And yeah, and as of 2021, it's from that one reel really that took off. That's when I really, really started running. And yeah, as of right now, like that's pretty much been the history to date.
What do you think it is about that reel that took off that got so many people to want to resonate with it and resonate with you?
Honestly, man, I really don't know. That reel specifically wasn't anything I thought about when I was posting it. I had no like intention of thinking that, oh, hey, this is like going to be the one, this is going to be the one. Because full disclosure, aside from this account, I've been pretty much doing this kind of content for like 4 to 5 years about through multiple different accounts, multiple different platforms, trying new stuff, but it was basically all the same thing, the same message. So to have one that really took off like this, you hear people say sometimes it's just maybe it's like the luck of the draw, more or less. But, I've been chipping away at this thing for forever and just hoping that, like this message can reach more people that need to hear it, because I just knew that before I started running, or even still now to date, like I love hearing messages like this from other people as well. I just think it's really beneficial, and I think it's everything I'm trying to put out is something that I would want to hear myself.
Well, there's even something to that, right? Within resilience is this component of, like you said, you've had several other accounts, 4 or 5 other accounts that you're putting out there, similar message, and this one just happened to hit for whatever reason. And then, the more it hit, the more the algorithm, I think, maybe favors it or whatever, and the more people it finds. But and the more the message gets found as well. So, but yeah, there's something to that where you said you've been doing this for 5 years before finally it hit, or something to that effect.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely some kind of there is merit in just numbers, absolutely, and just being consistent as well. Through that entire span, I had like, dude, it was crazy, man. I just had like this really regimented schedule about it because I figured that if I wasn't going to be consistent with it, there was no way that, this was going to take off, or no way I was going to get anywhere or even be able to stick with it. So I had this rule. I started out just like, let's just post 3 times a week. It's not that big of an ask, but no matter what, you're on vacation, anything comes up, you got to prep before, you got to get it done. That's got to be your standard. Eventually that grew like a little more to 4 times. But looking back at it now, it's kind of been like that for like, I don't even know how many years now, man. I just been lost in the translation, not really seeing any benefits or any outcome from that either. Just kind of falling in love with just doing it. Going through periods, of course, also just like, dude, what am I doing? I've been doing this for so long. I've seen nothing. Why do I keep going? Like, what's the point? And I feel like part of me inside is just, you just can't quit. Like, I didn't want to, I feel like this is being able to articulate some of the messages that I think are like somewhat well articulated in my head, at least. I figured that if I have some kind of a gift to be able to speak in, in any kind of exceptional manner, it's kind of my moral responsibility to, try to put that message into the world. So I was like, dude, I can't turn my back from this. Part of me inside was just so stubborn. I just can't give it up. Got to keep going no matter what, even though we can't see anything. Dude, literally before that one took off too, I was like, the past few weeks, I was getting into one of those ruts. Like, what am I doing? This is, bro, you've been at like, you haven't grown in, like 4 or 5 years. You think, what's going to change, right? Because that Einstein quote comes to mind. What is it? Like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expecting a different outcome. And yet here I am, man, just like throwing stuff at the wall, just hoping that something will stick. So I guess one did somehow. And I don't know, man. It sounds so crazy to me still,
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. Well, even it might be ironic. I don't know. Let me flesh this out in my head. But the quote that you said, the Einstein quote, Einstein gets credit for that. He deserves a ton of credit, but he gets credit for that quote, which wasn't him. But like, because, the only reason I know that is because I'm in recovery, and I've heard that quote in Forever in Recovery. It's like, well, this was Bill Wilson, who said this quote. So I did some research on, I'm like, where did this quote actually come from? So when the big book, or the Alcoholics Anonymous book, came out, it came out right at the same time as this, like, I think it was like a book. Somebody's going to correct me on this. I think it was like, it's just a random book by some lady, like a random book that came out. And she put out the same quote right around the same time as Alcoholics Anonymous book came out. So nobody knows who to credit, whether it's Bill Wilson or what. Did Bill Wilson steal it from this, like small name publisher back in the 30s, sort of thing. But yeah, and then the quote gets out there, it carries on, and then it sticks to Einstein, and Einstein gets the credit for this quote, even though he deserves credit for much better things than that quote. But the quote is true, right? Like there's a certain aspect to insanity of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But there's also that idea of stick-to-itiveness, and, maybe tagged with passion and hope in order for it to maybe get on the other end of it.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more with that too. It just leads me to think, like, I guess not to, make light of the word insane or insanity, but it's also a deviation from the norm. So it's like, who is it considered insane by, right? If you are sticking to it over and over and over again, how do you know it's not going to work? How do you know you're on the wrong path? How do you know, like, sometimes you just need that consistency and just the numbers game to figure something out. And I guess fortunately, as of now, that's something that I was willing to do.
Yeah, I guess it's a good point, right? Like, so what's the edge? What's the edge of listening to your support system or listening to peers that say, we don't think this is the right path for you? But just on the other edge of that is the breakthrough, right? Just on the edge of that is the breakthrough where you're like, now, all that hard work kind of paid off, and here's the outcome of it, right? So it's an interesting thing, because when I'm working with people, and I do this for myself too, I have an accountability system set up of different people I reach out to when I'm struggling with something. And I encourage clients that I'm working with to do the same. And a lot of it, in the sake of trying to battle your ego, is to take a step back and listen to those people that you've set up as accountability systems, and let them kind of take the reign, especially if you're butting up against that wall, or it's a challenge that you haven't faced yet, that type of stuff. But then on the other end of that is like big breakthroughs that I've had. Like the big one that I've had where, like, when I started running, was like, I started running with zero training. I did a marathon with zero training. I wasn't a runner before that. And then, and the feedback that I got was essentially, no, that's stupid. Don't do it, from people that I love and have offered me really good feedback in the past. I'm like, but it's different this time. When you tell me that, I feel like even more I need to lean into it. I feel like even more I need to do this thing. So it's a weird conundrum there on how to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay. So you like actually run. Yeah. I just like, I just took a little bit now. Okay. So you actually run. That's very cool.
All right, real quick. So in the theme of resilience, I have 2 challenges for you, the listener. The first challenge: if you find this interview insightful or interesting, you really like the content that is coming in, please like, follow, share, subscribe, all of those things within whatever platform you use. Tell a neighbor, tell a friend, talk to your cat about it. Like, let's get this out there. This show is real tiny, and the interviewees that come on this show and share their insight, their wisdom, it can help a lot of people. So the more that it can get out, the better that it can serve the mission that I'm trying to do, which is to normalize chasing failure. So the second challenge that I have for you is to invest 15 minutes of your time into a timeshare opportunity that I have for you. I'm just kidding. I'm not selling you a timeshare opportunity. But what I am doing is I want you to take 15 minutes of your time and invest that into another episode that I have done. Please help me know. What I'm hoping for is for you to come in the comments section and give me some good feedback. Maybe scrutinize me a little bit. Let me know how I can be better as an interviewer to help this show be more palatable for you. But this isn't all about me. How did you like the guest? What were some of the insights that you got from the guest? Leave that in the comments section as well. This is all good stuff. So within the theme of resilience, those are the two challenges that I have for you. Help me, help you, help the show. Let's get better. Let's keep growing. Thanks, guys.
But piggybacking off that point too, I honestly, man, I never really found like that I've had much of a direct support system, or with definitely like close friends that will always encourage you and will always kind of like pat you on the back for doing some cool stuff once in a while. But I feel like it's always just been just kind of like me and my own thoughts, for better or for worse too. When I was like doing all this posting stuff too, I didn't follow really anyone. None of my friends, didn't connect with anyone, didn't want to, because I just wanted to focus on just pump it out. Like I don't want to think about who's watching. I didn't I got to remove everything that could possibly deter me from like doing this on my set schedule and seeing no results. Like, it was bad enough that it was just like no results whatsoever. Now it's like you don't want to think about people looking at you and being like, yo, this guy's a freak. Not that even that something that will matter, but I'm just like, if it's not going to help me, and if it's only going to hurt me, even if it's like 1% of just something wired in the back of my head, I can't have that. And that's something that I'm willing to cut out, because in my heart of hearts, I know this is what I want to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. Whether they do encourage me or don't encourage me, it really doesn't change the fact that I still have to do it either way. And the reality hasn't been created yet. And it's still only up to me.
Yeah, that's a scary line, man, because you're out there doing a balancing act without too much support there, but also what has some brilliance to it is the people that are not in the place that you want to be, and that maybe don't deserve credit into who you want to be because they're not living it out themselves. Maybe like their feedback to you is going to hold you back. You're like, I don't even want to put those people in like within earshot, because like they don't deserve to have a role there. I'm trying to do something special here.
Yeah. And I feel like, and the weird thing is, I feel like that goes with the positive messages too. It's like, man, like it's obviously not the healthiest thing, but part of me too was also thinking, you're not doing what I'm doing. You can say all these things, but it's like, who really understands? It's just the person that's doing it. And this is just like posting content. It's not a big deal at all. But in other realms too, it's like you hear from people that, aren't really consistent in their own lives, that, and it's just, it doesn't really mean anything to me aside from, I don't know, man. Sometimes I think like words are really just words, and it's really like, it doesn't create, I don't think it creates anything. I really think the intention plus the action does. And it really just comes down to you, yourself.
What began to get you within this mindset? So you're setting up the time frame of nothing crazy growing up, but you got into swimming. So you're into athletics. You had this kind of athletic background. And then you started, after college, started hitting the gym. At what point was it where consistency and discipline started to play a huge role in your life? Like you were really grinding. You were making sure you were getting it done.
I think the first form happened when I first started hitting the gym, for sure. It's just one of those things that there are no external variables. You don't point fingers at anyone else. You're totally responsible for your outcomes and your goals. Like you're applying to college, and just as a random example, you're competing against people, right? And there are a lot of things you can control, and there are a lot of things you might not be able to control either. But something like just working out, it's completely on you. No one else can force you to eat a bad diet. No one can really force you to have a good diet. No one can really make you go to the gym when you don't feel like going to. You can have a lifting buddy. You can have an accountability partner too. But at the end of the day, it's like, you can still just text them and be, nah, I'm not really feeling it, man. I'm not going to, and like, they can't really do anything either. They might rag on you a little over text, but if you didn't want to be there, I'm sure that's not really going to change your mind in the first place. So having something that had, it's such a direct ROI of you get out exactly what you put in. I think that was definitely the cornerstone that made me think about, I think, life just a little bit differently. It's like, okay, now, sure, there are other things like academics, professional careers that do have other obstacles and external variables. But at the same time, now I feel more familiar with what exactly I can bring to the table, and everything else, just like let it fall into place. But I'm going to treat this like, like if you're kind of prepping for a bodybuilding show, you're going to do your cardio, you're going to hit your macros to the T, you're going to hit your gym sessions to the T, and then everything else. Hey, what if someone beats me? Like, I mean, it is what it is, but you really knew that you put everything in there. And I think that kind of mentality was really harnessed from just working out, weight training to begin with, seeing your body change in real time. You're just, I can do something. I can actually do something. This is crazy.
Mm. And how does that then transfer into the normal day to day, the normal day to day job, the stay at home mom, the whoever's that is handling day to day life? How does something like having a regimented exercise routine like you have transfer into the day to day?
I think it makes it easier to stick with problems for longer. When I was younger, I didn't really have much of an attention span to do that. Whenever I would be studying for tests, you're doing practice exams. Back then, all of these things were on paper, but like you're covering the answer and then you're just thinking, you look at the answer and you're like, oh, I knew that. I'm not going to review it anymore because I knew it, even though you didn't really guess it yourself, or you didn't it was a lot of hindsight bias and whatnot. But like a lot of that was just, it was a lot of like self-affirmation without having any evidence, more or less. So I think after getting more familiar with the gym, working out a little bit more, you grow a little bit more of self-confidence and also patience, I would say. Being able to stick with problems for longer, at a point where you can't figure it out, you don't just turn the book down and walk away. You kind of sit there because you're almost like a little more competitive with yourself too. Like, I want to figure this out. The only way out is through. I can't just leave. If I leave it, it's not going to get solved. Right. And I think that's probably the biggest cornerstone mentality that's definitely been brought to work. Absolutely.
Okay. Stepping back to at whatever point this kind of transition starts happening for you, what were the influences that helped begin to get you onto the road where you felt like you were on the right path?
So, rewinding a little bit, I started working out early high school, and that's when I feel like I started to get an idea of those benefits I was talking about earlier. But the truth is, it did improve me from my baseline, but it was still far, far from where I wanted to be. Did okay in high school. It did okay in college. Definitely nothing exceptional. Wasn't flunking everything left and right by no means, but also wasn't really doing that well either. Just kind of doing the bare minimum, skating by. It was fine, but you had some peers telling you, oh, like, you do so well, you're so smart. And it just definitively wasn't really the case either. I don't, to this day, I don't even know why they were really saying that. But a lot of that just kind of, it created an illusion of who I was in my head that the reality didn't really reflect. And after graduating college, I really started coming more to terms with that, because now it's suddenly you don't have school. You got to figure out your life by yourself. Like, there's not a curriculum to follow. You don't have to be somewhere. You don't have to be at class at like 9 a.m. It's like suddenly now you're kind of off the leash. And I felt pretty lost, honestly, because when I was on the leash, I feel like I was just treading water. I wasn't actively thinking about where I was going. I was just going wherever the person was walking me. But after, suddenly you're off it and you're just like, now you kind of look at your deficiencies, and now it's really coming to light, because now everything that you did the bare minimum before, you're starting to pay a little bit of the consequences now, because you don't really know what it means to work hard. You don't really know what it means to stick with problems for a little bit longer. You don't really understand how it feels to really study hard. You thought you did, or I thought I did, but I didn't really, and I didn't really know, like how to really push myself. So, after graduating college and kind of getting out into that professional space and just, finding out who I want to be in general, I kind of looked at myself in the face and was really just thinking, dude, you don't really have anything going on for you. And that was like the big reflection internally. Like, you were never historically good at anything. You never were really talented at anything. And you also refused to do any of the work that would bridge the gap between where you want to be. You have no talents and you also have no work ethic. And it's like, you're somehow floating. I don't know how you're floating, but it's somehow working out. But that's not who I want to be, because it sounds corny, but the way I saw it was I really only get to do this once, and I feel like I've lost so much time already,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I think that was the big cornerstone. I just thought, all right, well, something's got to change, because the life in front of you right now is really requiring you to be someone who you aren't. And you're not going to make it out there, man. Like it's not going to be good enough.
Mm. Was there a particular, like, did this just kind of happen as a result of something? Like I said, was there any influences or any content that you're taking in that helped you begin to have that light bulb come off? Or was it a consequence that had you have that light bulb come off?
I think it was just an accumulation of consequences. Going through high school and college, even though, I had people occasionally just kind of, blow a little smoke up your ass, and you think you're all that and whatnot. But there was always that internal voice that would just say, hey, like, the evidence isn't here. But you push it down, right? You push it down. It's fine. I feel good. This is good. I'm just going to take it all in. And then, like, it happens again. The internal voice gets a little louder. You still got no evidence, man. What are you doing? Years start to pass now. And now that internal voice it's become a shout almost. So now, after all this fact, even though people were telling me certain things, I knew I had nothing to show for it. And no one knows you better than yourself. You know how hard you work. You know the truth. You can't really hide from that. And I think at that point, I feel like it was kind of the edge of the cliff. You're walking towards that cliff. You're walking towards it the entire time. But now I was really over, and I was looking over. Just like this, everything that's gotten you to this point now, it's not going to work anymore. Now you actually have to really do something with yourself.
Mm-hmm. That internal voice doesn't get the credit it deserves. It's oftentimes villainized, or it's like, I think so. The internal voice, I think it starts off initially as an internal accountability system, and then the more you don't do things, and then upbringing, depending on how, like, your father might have treated you and that sort of stuff, can kind of help dictate how bad that voice gets and how quick and aggressive that voice gets. But my thought on it is the voice turns into the critic, or turns into like some awful, disparaging voice that creates shame. It gets there when you're not doing things that you ought to be doing. So it starts off almost like, well, you could be doing this better. And depending on your amount of trauma in life, depending on how small your resilience is at the time when you hear that voice, will depend on whether you heed its advice or whether you don't. And if you don't heed its advice, it's going to turn into shame, and it's going to get more and more aggressive and more loud, and it's going to be screaming at you, and it's going to be saying awful things about you. And if your resiliency still is not there, it's just going to make you cave. It's going to make you fall to it. And then you have all sorts of symptomology as a result, whether it be anxiety, depression, so on and so forth. But yeah, so that internal voice it's interesting, because now, it's been for me, it's had its own, like, it was pretty disparaging and aggressive at one point in my life. And I probably deserved it. No, it's not. I deserved it, right? Like, I was being a sucky human being. And so the voice was letting me know that I was being a sucky human being, and in very aggressive ways. And I couldn't really take it. So I would just keep drinking or whatever. But then when you start listening to it, or start making the smallest of changes, all of a sudden that voice starts to make some more sense. You're like, okay, yeah. Just like you were saying, if you have some people blowing smoke and you're like, thanks, your ego kind of likes the pat on the back, but there's this other part of you that's like, bro, like, they don't know. Like, you didn't work half as hard as you could have. You could have woken up earlier. You could have got this in. Like, what would you look like if you performed the way you could?
Yeah, exactly. And, back at the point when all that was happening, when people were occasionally blowing smoke, and the way I'm framing it, it almost sounds like people are constantly doing it. It's not even the case, which goes to show, like, how easily my ego wanted to be fed. It was once like in a blue moon, it wasn't even a constant thing, but the way I would register it, it's like, yeah, like that's all I need. And you feel full for like another month until it happens again. Um, yeah, but at that stage of my life, I don't even think like the interest to improve wasn't there. And I don't know if that's because it wasn't at that critical boiling point yet, if it was just a, a lack of maturity, and maybe both of those things. But I just like I didn't, because I always think if I could go back and change something, what would I change? Or like, do you have like any real like deep regrets? Yeah, sure, I regret a lot of things, absolutely. But I also know that I don't think anything could have been changed. I think time and experience really did have to take its course. I just like, I just wasn't that guy, and I'm still not. I'm on my way now though. But before I was just, no, I wasn't interested, which kind of makes it a scary problem to solve thinking about it now. Like the desire wasn't there. Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, the good thing with that though is life's going to give you plenty of opportunity for the desire to get there at some point. Like life's going to throw it at you, and at some point, like that's the guarantee is you're going to get plenty of opportunity to learn that you suck and you need to make a change, right? Or learn that there needs to be areas of improvement, and so yeah, life is going to put a mirror up to you and say, here's the things that you need to work on. So yeah, okay, so I like to ask people this question sometimes because definitions can vary, but they always seem to be kind of closely related depending on who's saying their definition of it. But what's your definition of discipline?
The only thing that comes to mind is this one quote: "If today you don't have enough, tomorrow you'll always have enough." Like, no one wants to do these things, myself included, but everyone wants what happens after. And it's interesting. I think like that's like the fight of life though, because it never ends. The idea is like there's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. If it's never today, are you ever going to be satisfied tomorrow? But I think the beauty and believing in that is that you start to find value in today when you start doing the things that just suck the most. So it's like the quote almost leads you to a false reality, or it's like it entices you of some future promise, but the real magic happens right now because you started believing in that future. If that even makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel like and I feel like this is within the message that you're sharing, but how does discipline play a role then in somebody getting to a place that they want to be, or just a better place than they are now?
I think depending on where they are now and where they want to go, it most likely or almost indefinitely comes down to the fact that something internal has to change. And I think a lot of that, what we're talking about before, if you're neglecting your internal voice, your subconscious almost, you start to feel a little bad because you know the truth. Even if you're not rationally thinking about it directly in your line of sight, you know what you should be doing. You could have given more, all these things. So I think, forcing yourself to give more in that moment, you're going to see progress. It's almost going to be inevitable, even if it's not the most efficient progress. I'm not talking about optimization, but even just doing like one little thing better. Even just drinking more water in the day, man. Like just running like a mile in the morning, just walking, going out for a walk in the day if you never did it before, but forcing yourself to commit to that new structure of life. One, I think you get to experience more life, which is a big thing I learned from just starting to run. You get to see things being outside at like 4:30, 5 a.m. in the morning. It's very tranquil. It's kind of scary sometimes. Like when it's pitch black, it's like, but it's like, it's a beautiful thing. And you just think like, there's so many of life's opportunities and of life's beauties that you're missing out on just because I don't feel like it, but you kind of push yourself to commit, you keep your promise to yourself, you go out there and then sure, it might be a metaphor, but you see so many things literally and so many things that figuratively you wouldn't have seen otherwise just because you showed up in a different arena of your life, man. but it only happens when you have the discipline to honor that commitment and honor that word to yourself.
Yeah, and specifically with running, like you said, it can get scary at times. I've seen some weird stuff with running. Like,
Yeah, man.
uh, I was doing 100K in Auburn, California, and or in Cool in Auburn, California. But so like I was at this point where I'm like, I don't know, do I keep going or do I quit? Like it was a pretty hard, like basically my body shut down. I went out too hard. Anyway, long story short. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go to the next aid station. And then I get up and I go to the next aid station, and I'm kind of in a daze a little bit, and I hear this super loud, almost like this, like, I don't know how to describe it. It was like a very loud, almost like a squeal. And I'm like, what is that? And I start paying attention, and it's just a rattle going super loud. I'm like, what in the heck? So I look off, and I see a bobcat jumping up and down, like pouncing up and down. I'm like looking closer, and it's a bobcat and a rattlesnake fighting. Like, bro, how do you see, like, who gets to see a bobcat and a rattlesnake fighting?
Yeah, man.
So the bobcat won. The rattlesnake was still doing its rattler thing after it was dead. But yeah, so that was cool. And then my last race, I freaking saw a black bear like 40 feet in front of me. I got so excited, I got lost. I got so excited, I went the wrong way on the path and got lost. I was like, I got so excited about it. But yeah, pretty cool stuff happens when you give yourself the opportunity to be in weird situations that you wouldn't normally be in. And like running at night is like, when I talk about your senses being on overdrive, like you said, running and it's pitch black, and all of a sudden you hear a little sound, you're like,
yeah,
like I hear everything. Yeah.
Yeah, like doing those morning runs when it's 5 a.m. in the East Coast in the winter when it's really dark, especially. Even like you run up to a little bird that's just sitting in the road, but you can't see it because it's like 15 feet out and your line of sight is only 13, and it goes crazy. Dude, it's just, especially when you're tuned in, you're trying to, capture that runner's high, and then something just happens. Anything just sets you off. You're constantly alert, and it's just, yeah. But honestly, I'd rather be nowhere else.
Yeah. So a lot of your content, and that's cool that you like running. I hate running, but there is that point, like for me, my body, like it's about a 6 mile mark. Sometimes on a good day, it's like maybe 3 miles, but about a 6 mile mark, my body starts to wake up, and then I get into this flow, I get into this rhythm, and all of a sudden, but the first 6 miles are just kind of terrible for me. But what I notice with a lot of your content is most of it seems to be shot either during or after an exercise. And here's tell me if my assumptions are wrong. My first assumption is just because adrenaline is happening and you're feeling really good, maybe it's that runner's high. And then the second one is like when you're going through a run or you're putting yourself through, and it could be walks too. There's actually been some really cool research on walks, but you get this insight and it feels very important. And then you're like, well, I should probably share this. Right. And so maybe it goes up on your media, but those are my two assumptions as to maybe this is why he's posting either after an exercise or during an exercise, is partly because of the adrenaline, or partly because he's just gained some insight where he's like, oh, people need to hear this.
Yeah, no, you are right. I would say though, so the way I do my content is that I will write general topics about what I want to talk about, just in like Apple Notes beforehand, just so I know kind of like these are the points I want to hit in the next week or two, some rough idea like that. But the reason why a lot of it happens after running, after working out, it definitely does have something to do with the adrenaline for sure. I feel like it makes me a lot more articulate because I'm awake, my mind's awake, my body's awake. But the bigger thing I would say is because I'm speaking about what I'm doing in that moment, and it's very present for me. A big thing with my content specifically, or I guess just the way I like to do my videos, if I don't believe what I'm saying, if I haven't really been living to any of the values that I talk about, I won't post it. That's one. But the bigger thing is I can't do the video I just like, I can't talk about it. The words don't come to my brain. My mind shuts off. It just feels insincere because, you're like a cheater, man. You can tell all these people and yeah, you can't even tell yourself. There's this internal voice, man, but it shuts down my brain. It's almost like a barrier. Like you're not going to, no, you're not going to do this today because you didn't do it today. So you're not going to talk about it. You're not going to get some clout, just lying about your life. So, like wrapping around to your question, I think a lot of it is present based. After a run, I'm just like, okay, this is how I like to feel, and this is who I like to be. And now I feel like I have the confidence almost to be articulate enough to have like any kind of flow of consciousness to make like a coherent 30, 45-second video. But if I do none of that, and if I woke up, I skipped my alarm, didn't go for that run, I just like, I can't do it, man. I can't do it. Brain just shuts off.
Yeah, let's go into that then. The failures, right? So you didn't wake up, or you missed your alarm, or you didn't adhere to what your internal accountability system was telling you to adhere to. How often does that happen in the reality of your life? You seem to be a pretty disciplined man that is consistent, but even with consistency, even with the discipline that you have, how often do you meet failure?
In terms of the alarm going off and I sleep in, at this point, it's incredibly rare. It almost never happens. I will say I will snooze. I will lay in bed for an extra 10 minutes. I will drag. I'll brush my teeth extra long, man. I'll just, like sometimes you stare at yourself in the mirror for a while, just thinking like, oh man, it's just, and I feel like getting out of bed isn't the hardest part. It's the sink. For me, it's the sink that's the hardest because now it's so quiet and it's like that's the hardest part to make it outside the house. And, but I feel like, so I just try to turn it all off. Just don't think about anything. Just go speed run it. Just because the second you're out the door, you're good. But like from the bed to the shoes, it's like, wow, it's harder than the run itself, honestly. I'd say, so I'd say that initial failure has definitely, I've become a lot better than that, or better at it. Like I'll drag my feet, I'll do whatever, but I'll get out there. Now in terms of, I guess like hitting goals and whatnot during the day, that's definitely a lot more often, I would say. I don't usually go for a specific pace. Or I guess in the gym, I do try to go for specific numbers. I'd say maybe like once a month or something, I'll miss something significant. But aside from that, the standard that I've been setting for myself is I've been pretty consistent with it. I think on the hardest days to wake up, when your body feels the most shot, once again, as long as you can make it out the door, the second I get out the door, I feel like I gain more power because now it's like you feel beaten down. You kind of feel like a little bit of a warrior. You feel bad and yet you're still here. And it's weird. You start to internalize, I'm feeling so bad right now. I'd rather be anywhere else. And suddenly like that triggers that second response. This makes being out here right now that much cooler.
Mm-hmm. So how do you handle failure when you meet it? How do you handle it?
In small capacities, maybe just like not hitting the lifts I want to that day, maybe just going at a much slower pace than I'm used to. I feel like at this point, honestly, I've been pretty good at brushing it off because for me still the biggest battle really is just, it's getting out the door, man. It's like that first initial thing of bed to shoes is, if I can make it out there, I'm just like, this is golden, man. Fortunately, I've been very good at that. So in my mind, I feel like, even if I'm missing the mark slightly on pace or on lifts, it doesn't weigh me down too much. But, there was like a day, it might even been 2 days actually, in the past few months that I did miss the alarm. I just like, dude, I'm not doing this today. And I just totally lost that battle. That definitely hits harder. But, I mean, the way I think about it too is just, cheesy saying, man, life's the marathon, get back on it tomorrow. And yeah, fortunately, I guess I haven't missed 2 in a row yet, because I think that might take a little bit more evaluation. But the next day has usually always been pretty solid. So you just get back pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an important piece, right? So typically routines or habits can start getting broken down in a few different measures. One is, you can think of it simplistically as 3 days in a row with something, like skipping something 3 days in a row. And it's more than skipping it. It's skipping it when you told yourself you were going to do it and it's important. So it's like, it's a weakening of resilience by day 3. So day 1, you skip it and you're like, oh man, okay. But you offer yourself some grace. You get through it. Day 2, it happens again. Now you're really kicking yourself. By day 3, the work that you've done on resilience is pretty hard to battle back from, right? It takes because it takes resilience to maintain it. So if you're knocking down the thing that helps you maintain it, it's hard to maintain it. And that's just when you have like newer habits. But say like you've had a habit for 6 months or something. But if you've had a habit for years, 6 months plus, let's say, give or take, if you don't do it after a day or two, the feeling is enough, because now you're just like, okay, I'm off. There's something way off. I have to, like, this is so medicinal for me. I can't go any more days without the medicine. I have to take it now. And so it's like, when it's this built-in habit over a prolonged period of time, it's much easier to sink right back into it if you've messed up.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Which speaks to the importance of consistency and just kind of building that up slowly over long periods of time. And I resonate with you where you're talking about that period of time between you and getting your shoes on and getting out the door. Like for me, it's not necessarily getting my shoes on. It's getting off my chair from having my decaf coffee and then heading out the door. And like typically, so my gym is like 100 feet from my house, this shipping container. And then, but if I'm going for a long run, I'm fortunate where I live in an area where there's nice hills and stuff. But the trails that I like to go on, like I live remote enough to where everything's like at least a half an hour away if I'm going to go anywhere, even trails, right? So everything's at least a half an hour away. So even if it's like the high school track that I'm going to go on to, that's 25 minutes away. And so it's just getting into my car. Once I get into my car and I start it and I'm heading that direction, it's like, okay, that now the mind is starting to switch. It's like, we've already gotten here. But so it's waking up, having that decaf coffee, getting into the car. That's the challenge for me. That can sometimes, like you said, the brushing of the teeth or looking at yourself too long in the mirror, whatever, like things just magically become delayed all of a sudden.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I can resonate. Okay, so this is a quote of yours. Every single day is an opportunity for personal atonement.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I think it's very insightful, and I'd like for you to kind of explain that out. So every single day is an opportunity for personal atonement. I guess that makes total sense. Like it doesn't need much explaining, but have you kind of take that quote and then have it lead into the idea of the importance of self-promises.
Yes. Yeah, I think it goes directly hand in hand. That quote is that one was definitely right from the heart, because like I said before, based on how I was and how I saw myself growing up through high school and college, or how I saw myself after the fact, I just kind of saw myself as just a failure, man. Like, you can't do anything. You're not willing to do anything. That's the problem. Being like talentless is less of an issue, but the bigger issue is you're not really willing to do anything. And this is at the point where, I might have been a little more interested in trying to improve myself, but I just that either the discipline, the motivation, the desire to do it just isn't there. And, you start to grapple with thoughts like, people, you start thinking about things like, do people change? Can I change? Is that even possible? If it is possible, what is it going to take? Is it going to be just picking up a new hobby? I don't know what it's going to be, but I got to find a way to change my core, because I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not the person who I want to be. And it's scary, especially when you try to take on new things and you do well for a little bit of time and you fall off and you just it only reinforces those core fears. Like, yeah, of course I fell off, because it's me. This is who I am. This is like, I had no chance because I'm not wired that way. So I think the first step was really just believing that it is possible. I don't know how like I'm gonna get there yet. I don't know how it is even possible, but I feel like it can still be done. I was never a guy that looked a lot at research. I wasn't really like a big science guy, and specifically at this point in my life, now I really didn't want to look at it because I didn't want to find any research that would contradict my belief of, oh, is the brain still plastic at age 25, at age 26, 27? Is that like, I don't want to read that. You know what I mean? So now it's like, I just have to believe it, and I'm just going to make my life a fantasy, but I have to believe that it's possible. It's got to be something that still can be done. I don't know how, I don't even know if it is, but I have to believe that it is. So every single day you have to do these things, right? You have to honor promises to yourself. You have to promise yourself that you're going to stick with those problems for a little bit longer. I just think about like when I failed on studying in grade school and college, and like you look at the test, you don't know anything. Oh yeah, because you barely looked at the papers beforehand, man. That's your fault. So with everything else in life too, like put more time in. Put more time in yourself. This is the only way you're going to change in whatever shape or form, whatever field of life. That's the promise. And if you keep keeping that promise to yourself each day, you're like, that personal atonement is happening. You're kind of redeeming yourself in your own eyes. Like, maybe I still can be someone. Maybe I'm not going to be a loser my entire life. Maybe like I have a chance at this thing still. Maybe I have a chance to like really feel happy and really feel proud about myself, because I can't say I've really genuinely felt that before. Not really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. And so what are some, like, if you know of any, but like practical protocols to help with that? So part of it is like, like with self promises, I think one of the number one causes for procrastination is an abundance of broken self promises over a lifetime, right? And then when you do finally promise, or then when you do promise yourself something that you really mean at the time, it could be, I'm never going to drink again. I'm done. I've drank too much. I'm done drinking. Or I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. to go work out. Or I'm gonna make sure at work I really hit it hard. I'm gonna make sure I'm doing the extra little effort things that the boss isn't expecting me to do. I'm gonna make sure I do all these little things. I'm not cutting corners anymore. Whatever the promises are, because you've had enough. But by the time a person makes that promise, it's almost like that internal part rolls its eyes, like, bro, how many times? Like, we've been through this. Like, we already know. And then so for an alcoholic, for example, it'd be by the time it's 5 p.m. the next day, all of a sudden it's like that promise that they made the morning of it's over, it's done, and then they go back to this broken promise. And I think it's devastating from an interpersonal relationship standpoint to break promises to people that you care about, but it's even more harmful to break promises to yourself.
Yep.
For you, what kind of protocols or steps have you used that help you to keep a promise or to follow through with something?
I never really thought about it in a protocol sense, but one thing that was the issue was feeling like those long-term promises, those long-term commitments, whether it's, I'm going to wake up at this time, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to drink. If you relapse after a long stint of keeping that promise to yourself, that I feel like that's the worst. And that's when you really start to feel like, oh, it's not possible. I think the biggest thing is you got to go a little easier on yourself sometimes. And I think there is a lot of congratulations, and I think there is a lot of merit that needs to be given for even deciding to take that first step, because you could easily just keep drinking. You could. It could destroy your life, but you could still just, it's the easier thing to do if you're already at that point. You could easily not wake up at that time. It's fine, but that's kind of the issue that I always struggled with. Everything was just fine. And it's just, but there was no color. There was nothing. It's just, And I felt like, yeah, like there was no color in my life. Definitely, there was no color in the way I saw myself. So clearly, even though I was never in a stage, never in a hole like a recovering alcoholic or anything that, anything of that magnitude. But for me, I just saw, I guess like any step in the right direction is a good step in the right direction. Kind of like segueing out of your question, because I don't have a protocol. I think that I think that the reason needs to bleed deep. And I think that can look very different for a lot of people. But for me personally, when I said I didn't really have a desire or interest for discipline when I was younger, it didn't interest me or phase me. And therefore I would never be able to, tell myself the importance of that, even if I went back in time and told myself like, you gotta do this because of this. It didn't interest me, but I didn't have a reason for it to. But I feel like now that I have a reason, and that's the big shining light on top of that big picture, every small thing towards that, whether it is a streak, whether it is a day you miss a day, whatever the case may be, you're getting closer to that reason. That reason is always in the back of your mind. And it definitely makes each day easier and makes falling off the chain easier to get back on, because it bleeds deep enough.
So with that theme of it bleeds deep enough, like what's your personal why, if you don't mind sharing?
For me, it's a big one. It's definitely a few that come. I think it's a big thing that comes in different shapes. One big part of it is regret. I always felt like I could do more. I say that respectively and relatively, of course, but I could never even taste that before, because I could never stick with any problem long enough for me to even feel like I could achieve any kind of potential. And the second one was, if you don't get anywhere, you're always going to grapple with those feelings and the confirmation that, yeah, like you were destined to be a loser. You were destined to never achieve anything. Everyone was right. Your genetics were right. Your thoughts were right. The hopelessness that you always thought about never being able to do anything of value for yourself was right. Like the rut mentality that you had for yourself too, always right also. And if this is the only time and the only chance I get to do this whole thing, I don't want it to be that. But really coming to terms with that reason of just, I don't want my life to be that. If nothing else happens ever after this, if I don't have any memory of this ever, like it can't be that. It's too painful.
That's a good why. Regret in general is a good, when motivation runs weak, because it will, regret will seem to kind of fire something up within you. And in the recovery rooms, in the 12-step rooms, they talk about play the tape through, which is an old term because nobody uses tape anymore, but it basically means like just use your experience of your past and then predict what your immediate future looks like based off of this choice. If you make this choice, what does that look like tomorrow, the next day, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road? If you make this choice today, what does that look like for you? And so for the alcoholic or addict like myself, we can look at it and be like, okay, I see where that goes because I've lived that life. I have enough empirical evidence of my life to tell me this is where this is going to take me. And regret is a good thing there. Like that, essentially where it's going to take me is to regret. It's just like what you said. So if you can kind of project what that looks like, I find you can, in a very like high percentage rate, you can predict your immediate future pretty well if you just sit down and you think about it.
Yeah.
Like you won't predict what the grocery store clerk says to you or something, right? Like you won't predict whether you hit that red light or that green light. But in the grand scheme of like what's important in your day, you're going to predict things pretty well. And so if you sit and you think about it, okay, if I make this decision, am I going to be filled with regret? You can safely feel that. You can feel that really well. That playing the tape through strategy, right? So, okay. So this is a question when I was looking at your material, I'm like, well, let me go back to Fat Kenny. I'm 90 pounds overweight and I'm looking at somebody like you. And here's what that insecure Fat Kenny says. He says, well, I don't know. He probably says all sorts of things, but he probably says, yeah, well, you have special genetics. You like something's different about you. That makes you special to be able to do this. Or like, there's no way you're going to be able to keep that up because you're going to injure yourself, or you're going to whatever, you're going to burn out. Motivation's going to go away, blah, 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 blah. So I'm no longer Fat Kenny, but I can connect with that guy still. He's still there. So the question then comes up to try to help with maybe that person that's watching this. Let's talk about thresholds. Like, what is the point to where you stop and say, I have to take my foot off the gas? Or is there a threshold? Do you continue to push through it? Because I saw on one of your posts, I think maybe is on one of the stories, it showed you had an ankle injury, right? So you couldn't perform at a race, right? But so there is a threshold in terms of physical injury, but is there, like, for some people that's not even true, right? Like, you look at somebody like Andy Glaze, like, okay, the guy's still going to go run 100-miler with a torn hamstring. Sure. Like that's there's people like that too. So what is the threshold for you, and what would you suggest for people that are kind of following you? What would be a threshold if there is one?
The physical threshold for me, I do try to listen to my body for sure. The foot was like, it was not walkable. Like, so, honestly, like the picture didn't do it justice. That thing was black. Like, it was, and surprisingly, it somehow, like, it actually looked worse than it was too. I'm kind of contradicting myself a little, but it wasn't walkable. So that physical injury took me out of running for a little bit of time, honestly, maybe like 3 weeks. The first thing I did was just hobble over to the gym with Crocs and crutches on and just try to hit a longer, harder workout. At least you could spam upper body, you could do something, right? Eventually get onto the bike and just try to, work a little bit of that endurance back out, try to condition a little bit of that chasing discomfort feeling from running back in without doing the actual thing. So I think physical injury is probably one of the harder stops for me. And I think naturally it must be one of the hardest stops for most people as well. When I first started running too, I never really ran before at all. So in 2021, when I first started, like working my way up to like 3 miles a day, just doing it like every day, man, the Achilles, that thing lit up after like 2 weeks. I kept trying. And I did pretty well, man. Honestly, I pushed it to a pretty unhealthy point, but eventually it's like, all right, dude, you got to take time off because this is way too much. That was a legitimate threshold, but I found my way around it because it somehow Stairmaster and biking didn't hurt it. Makes no sense. I'm sure it's something to do with like deflection and whatnot. But so I think with physical boundaries, if there are alternatives, I think definitely try to pursue those just so you don't mentally fall off. The hardest thing is getting hurt and then you never get back on. Even like the foot recovers, but now it's like you forget what it feels to be in that routine, to have that groove, to have that kind of momentum. You lost everything. You stopped, right? You were just running and you stopped. Starting again, it's like, it's painful, man. Sometimes you just have to, you got to find some way to keep it going consistently. It reminds me, actually, I got this sleeve Memorial Day, and it was a 6-hour session, and we took like a few breaks, but I hated the breaks, man, because every time after the breaks, when you get back to it, I'm sure you remember too, it hurts way more because now it's like your body, it forgot about it for like 15 minutes. And now suddenly the skin's a little more tender too. And I'm like, dude, this is worse. This is worse. It hurt while he was doing it, of course, but stopping and getting back on, oh man. So I just kept thinking, sitting in that chair, like, this makes so much sense. You got to keep the momentum going in some shape or form. Like, congratulations for getting back on after the break. But in an ideal world, I think the easiest way to stick on is to keep it going. No matter how small, like, just don't stop. Just keep going in some shape or form.
I couldn't agree more. I think there might be a threshold in a particular domain, but then shift the energies according to what the overall strategy is. So like with your ankle, for example. So what you're trying to do is be consistent with a discipline of physical exercise. So you can't do it the same way you would want to because of an injury. But what did you do? You showed up and you did, like you started working the upper body and just focusing on upper body until eventually you can start to work on the cardio stuff, right? And so you adjusted and you flexed according to it. And so, yeah, that's what I call grace and boundaries. It's offering grace for the thing that if you were to do, it's probably stupid to do. It's probably not a wise thing. At the very least, it could potentially make the injury go prolonged, but you still have the overall standard, the boundary there of like, this is my goal is to be disciplined in this particular domain. So you can still do it. You just got to flex on what that looks like. You know, I had a pretty significant back injury, and it was just like, I can kind of do yoga in a chair for like a week, you know, like that was it. Like that was about it. So, and then that yoga kind of I started getting a little bit stronger, and the yoga got better. And then all of a sudden I'm lifting again, you know? So yeah, but yeah, that's all really good advice. Do you feel like there's anything that we've missed? Do you feel like there's anything that, in terms of with your message that you would like to get across to, you know, your audience or the people that don't know you very well? They kind of know Andrew from the IG page, but they don't know you from a personal standpoint or with anything more in depth than what you've posted.
Yeah, it's like I said, you know, at the start of this, I'm an average guy. I literally have no significant accomplishments, but I'm on my way, you know. And I think like I never want anyone to interpret my messages like you were saying, what previous Fat Kenny would think about. Oh, he's only this because of that, and like, you know, XYZ. No, we're literally the same person, or we're very similar at our cores. It's just I can get up at that time in the morning. I may have a little more experience in the gym just because I've been doing it for so long. But aside from that, fundamentally, like I'm nothing special, man. I'm really not. But I think I really feel like that's a lot of the beauty in the message too, because more people, I think, than not, must feel similar to that. That's just my assumption, just regular, you know. But like, how can you become extraordinary in your own life? That's the biggest message I want to put across. How can you still save you from yourself? How can you still find that chance to atone every single day, however that may look? You don't have to be like, you don't have to become like Goggins and run. Like when you were talking about running on the physical entry, it's first guy that comes to mind. It's insane, man. But I think there's a lot in between that, you know, that's still good and really, really healthy growth. And I think it's really good to recognize that, especially at a respective point in your own life too, at a relative point, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think, you know, there's the extremes where people will look also at like, you know, people like Goggins and people similar to him. There's another guy out here named Ray Sanchez, who's somebody I really look up to. And, you know, we went and did 100-miler and he wins the thing on a whim because he needed to get some miles in, and he had an MCL tear. Like, okay, bro's going to come up. He's 55 years old. He's going to come up and win 100-miler on an MCL tear to get miles in. Okay, dude. Like, so yeah, but like, there's people where you're like, you know, if you haven't done something to such an extreme to where you're able to, like, what did Goggins do a couple of months ago? Like he threw a ruck on and just rucked 100 miles, right? Like with no preparation. It's just like having a conversation with his girlfriend or wife, I think girlfriend, but just like, hey, like, I think I'm going to go do this. And she's like, all right, I got your back. And he went and did it. Like, so there's something to this point to where you get to such a level where those things that would blow like you and I away and be like, how, what, like what, like to them, they're just like, that's just the next thing for them. Right. That's the next set for them, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to understand it when you're not at that level. But yeah, and so that's one way I kind of conceptualize guys like that. And like they're normal too, right? Like they're just like us, but the years that they put in to harden themselves from a mindset perspective is like, I admire it. It's very admirable.
Yeah, and he gets so much hate, man, which is crazy. But it's like, it's the same mentality. Oh, you can only do this because of your genetics. And like, yeah, I mean, whatever it is, it's like, see, like that kind of mentality, the way I see it is, yeah, that's insane how he does that. And the first thing that comes to mind is, I can't believe someone like that exists. I can't believe a human being like that exists. That's literally, the same as us. And it's just how, but like, it's almost exciting in a way. It kind of like lights a little bit of a fire because now you can go the distance in your own life, however that may look. But if someone can do that, sure, he has more experience, but still the fact that there's so much in between, like me and someone like that. So even though he has all that experience, for me to even do like 15% up to that road, that's kind of a crazy and so different and such a positive way for my life. So I think looking at these things and these accomplishments and framing them, one is in a positive way, an exciting way, just seeing like human potential, man, that's a person. And you're living in the same time as them. That's one, it's a privilege. And two, it's phenomenal, man. But on the other side of the coin, I do also want to say that this might just be in my head, but I think when a lot of people watch, I guess, like the motivational, self-help, inspirational type videos, it's usually coming from people with the craziest accomplishments, so crazy that it almost seems a little out of touch for the regular person. And suddenly now the words don't really hit them the same way because it's like, Goggins is a creature of the night. Like he'll say some things and it's probably not going to resonate with most people just because it's like, dude, you're like like you're like a monster, man. I feel like we're not even the same species. But I think it's really important to remember that the message is still the same. And which is why I always want to reinforce that I'm no one special. I'm just a regular guy that just has a routine, has maybe like a little bit more discipline than the average person. But it's like, I want everything that I put out there to feel a lot more relative in a way. I don't have those crazy accomplishments. And for my message, I almost feel like the way I see it, it's kind of a good thing too. We're all on this road together, but the important thing is how we choose to frame, like the positive messages, how we choose to frame people that are above us. There's so many ways of looking at it. You can either see it as he's a psycho. There's no point in running like that. What is he running away from? You read it all, man. And then you can see too, like, that's a person like you and me. And dude, we could go so far still, but to have that average perspective and to show people like, it's okay to care about things. It's okay to get excited. It's okay to like be proud of your accomplishments, no matter how average they are. If they mean something to you, man, that's awesome. And you keep improving on top of that. And then like you look back in a few years, you're like, dude, I don't even recognize the person I was before. And now you've become the person before who you said, I have to become that person that didn't exist. They had to step up, the person who needed that person. And it's like, I don't know, man, but or you can look at everything negatively and the time passes either way. So it's just, I don't think there's any real other choice in life. Like, it sounds so simple, right? I know it's more complicated, but when you break it down fundamentally like that, the time passes either way. You can either be a hero in your own story, or you could just, keep ragging on other people, man. Keep bringing yourself down and just confirm every bad thing you've told yourself. It's up to you. The time passes either way.
Yeah, I have more I could add, but I think you just kind of dropped the mic, so I'm going to let you drop the mic with that one, because that was perfect way to end that thought. So yeah, man, Andrew, man, I really appreciate having you on. This was fun. Like I said at the beginning of this, there's not a lot about you from a personal accomplishment standpoint from the Instagram, so I didn't have a lot to go off of. So this was fun. I'm honored to have you on, dude. And I'm excited to kind of continue to watch you from afar and see you grow in your journey, dude.
Likewise, man. Thank you for having me. It's really enriching, to talk to someone like you, to talk to someone who thinks like the way you do, and also with your background too. It's exciting, man. You get to meet like-minded people, and yeah, it's humbling and it's really, really cool. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them.
I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was Two in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.
Scar tissue woven into grace, each imperfection a familiar face. We wear our struggles, no trace erased. In vulnerability we find our place. Rust is gray, not decay. We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures.